I'm here at the scene of the crime spree, right behind me.
Strange. Vice Mayor Strange, you'll address her properly.
You can kiss my foot.
Mr. Rickard, you're out of order.
FBI, we are asking you to investigate this council. Please look into this council, how they award contracts, the bid process, how they use their positions to benefit their friends and themselves, how they use their positions to attack residents and critics and neighbors and business competition. FBI, will you please look into this?
And I welcome the FBI here. If you notice, Mr. Thompson, with his plea for the FBI and his watchdog group, this city runs the cleanest in this whole county. I guarantee
He was served a federal subpoena this morning.
Did receive a subpoena this morning, and we're going to cooperate 100% with the subpoena. And
most of you who were involved up here, you gaslighted me. You tried to say I was crazy. And now we know that that's not true. And there's a lot of other issues I've been asking about as well.
All right, I want to catch you up on the latest in the Lynn Haven Corruption Case because things are getting hot. 3 or 4 motions have been filed over the last few days by the defendants, and we are less than 2 weeks away from the evidentiary hearing, the 2-day evidentiary hearing in front of Chief Judge Mark Walker in Tallahassee, in which it's anticipated that witness testimony will be given. And when I say witness testimony, what I'm talking about is people who have, I'm talking about witnesses, I'm talking about law enforcement. And the reason for that is the defense has asked Judge Walker, they filed a motion, and the motion is about 2 things. First, the defense says, Your Honor, it's hard for us to defend ourselves when the prosecutors still have not turned over all of the evidence that they have, much of which is exculpatory, which could show that we didn't do it. And you ordered them to give all of it. There was a deadline issued like 8 months ago, and they kept missing the deadline. And then they finally said a few months ago, okay, you finally have it all. But then there was that release of the affidavit, the search warrant affidavit, where it showed that the FBI told another judge all kinds of stuff contradicting the indictments against Margo Anderson and James Finch. And it showed that they had not turned over all of the evidence. And they won't. They said, you can come here and look at it. But wait, the judge already issued an order that said you got to give it all to the defense without them even asking. But of course, the defense is asking. So the motions filed by the defendants not too long ago were, one was the government needs to show cause. Show cause. Tell the court why it is that you haven't followed the court's orders and turned over to the defense all of the evidence. Why haven't you done that still to this day? You've got to show cause why you have defied the court's order. And the judge said, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Granted the motion. And then there was a second part to it. And the other part was to compel, for the third time, the prosecutors to turn over the evidence that they were supposed to turn over. So those 2 things. That means even though the prosecutors have dropped almost all of the counts, remember it was a big deal 2.5 years ago when there were the big press conferences with the U.S. Attorney's Office and Sheriff Tommy Ford and the FBI, and they promised to clean up the corruption in Bay County, we were all very excited. But they haven't. They haven't done that. There's a lot going on. COVID, a new election. There's things that slow it down. But since that time, we've been kind of sitting in limbo on the Lynn Haven case, and they started off with like 64 counts against Margo Anderson, and they've now dropped it all the way down to 2. And I don't mean the judge dropped it. The prosecutors themselves dropped it. And so they thought, okay, when it goes to a jury now, we've got 2 counts against Margo Anderson, 4 against Finch. And we don't have to put law enforcement on the stand. So, we don't have to defend or testify. But now they do before the trial in the evidentiary hearing, because it has to do with the evidence that has been withheld by the prosecution. Now, maybe in a couple weeks when this happens in Tallahassee on December 12th and 13th, maybe the prosecutors go up there and prove that they have turned over all the evidence, and the 2 defendants just keep attacking us as though we're the ones who are on trial. We're the government, man. We're not on trial here. And if they do that, then boy, they're going to get them. But what else could happen is the defense could say, what about this? Pretend there's a bunch of stuff on there. And what about this? And what about this? How come you haven't turned these things over? Or what about the stuff that was in the search warrant affidavit that we couldn't believe when we saw, but it's been resealed? What about that stuff that we've never got? There's going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be live testimony and documents presented. And I think they're going to have to get up there and explain it. It's going to be so interesting. I didn't think that it would happen at first, but I'm starting to believe it actually, the evidentiary hearing actually will happen. And I don't think the prosecutors, and I know that the sheriff's office and the FBI, they're not happy about it. They're doing all they can to get off the stand. But I think that Judge Walker is going to want to see everything and hear everything. And I think it's fair. And I think that if I were a prosecutor and I was cleaning up public corruption and the judge had questions about, let's say I was an investigator that found all the public corruption and maybe even testified in front of a grand jury and made the arrests, I'd be happy to go up and say, yeah, this is what they did, and this is how we found it, and here's our notes. But that's not what the sheriff's office and the FBI, they don't want to do that. So, whenever you look at something and one side's not being transparent, what else could possibly happen except for you wonder why they're not being transparent? Especially when the other side is saying, look at this, and you go, holy Nikes. I can't believe that. That's what happened last time at the evidentiary hearing. So if you're sitting in the back of the courtroom, if you're in the audience, first of all, you better not interrupt the court, because Judge Walker will arrest your ass. I mean, he's serious about this stuff. Like if you're disrupting the court, you've seen these trials recently, with Alex Jones or I forget all the people, the guy who ran over the folks at the Christmas parade, and you see the audience blurting things out and stuff like that. And the judges are really lenient about it. You have to leave. You can't do that in the courtroom. Judge Walker didn't play that. If you huff or puff, roll your eyes or sigh, he could hold you in contempt and arrest you. He doesn't play. So if you hear somebody in the background saying, holy don't point me out, because you end up with the rest of them in cuffs. I mean, it's going to be unbelievable. I couldn't believe what I saw at the last evidentiary hearing. And this one promises to be even more of a ball buster. I think that's the legal term. All right, I'm going to show you some stuff right now. But I know that Facebook has not been notifying people about this, because they don't, they think, burn it. I look like a button-down conservative, and they don't like that. You know, they don't know that I'm a freedom guy, liberty guy. I'm way more hip than a button-down conservative, all right? Looks can be deceiving. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is they don't share it, and so sometimes people never hear this stuff. They just read what WMBB has to say. And so if you would like to be the notification, I hope that you'll tag people who want to see this, share it on your page, because I'm going to show you what WMBB reported finally today about all of this. And you tell me if you think they're being fair. We're going to sort of grade their paper is what they're going to do. It's like when I was a college teacher and I taught persuasive writing, right? We're going to take a look at the paper, and we're going to see if it's how it's written. You're not going to believe it. So if you get a chance to share it or tag folks, I would sure appreciate it. And people need to know what I'm going to tell you. Can I tell you what some people have told me? Some people called me over the last few months, and they said, Bernie, you know, it looks like, and these are smart people, and more than a few, Bernie, it looks like you are defending sort of almost doing the bidding of former Mayor Margo Anderson and developer James Finch. Why are you beating the drums for them? We thought you wanted to clean up corruption, and look what they did. Here was my answer. I said, I am telling you what I see. I am telling you what the evidence is showing me. And I have yet to see any evidence that supports the charges and allegations in the indictments against Anderson and Finch. There was a lot of corruption in Lynn Haven. Some of the people who did it are still running around free. Some of the people who did it have pled guilty. But these two, if I see the evidence, I'm going to show you, but I keep telling you the evidence points to the contrary. As a matter of fact, it points to what they say in the motions, the defendants, vindictive prosecution. The judges called it reckless, and I think that's being kind. When I see the evidence that points to guilt, I'm going to tell you. And so now here, where are we now? This was my answer to people who have said this to me. I've said, I have told you that I have not seen the evidence. There might be evidence, but I haven't seen it. And where are we now? From 64 counts against Mayor Margo Anderson to 25 counts to 2 counts. And the last 23 were dropped by the prosecutors themselves, not the judge. The prosecutors, which WMBB never tells you. So I am telling you what I see. The reality of it is now in front of us. It's down to 2. I didn't think that the prosecutors would actually go through with an evidentiary hearing and allow the sheriff's office and the FBI and others in Lynn Haven who have been mentioned in indictments but not arrested, not indicted. I didn't think that they would allow the prosecutors. I didn't think they would allow these people to go up on the stand and go under oath and face tough questions. But I do think it's going to happen now. And it's going to be, if this happens on the 12th and 13th, it's going to be, just be prepared to be shocked. I think you're going to be shocked. I know I was last time, and I think I'm going to be more shocked this time. And so will you be. All right, so let's take a look at some stuff. But first, I want to thank those who allow me to do this.
You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome.
When your life is on the line, hire the lawyer who lives in our community, works in our community, and worships in our community. I'm Al Saulene, your Panama City Beach lawyer. 850-215-0628.
All right, so today, just a little while ago, WMBB reported on this, and here's what we have. New motions call for dismissal in Lynn Haven case by Brady Calhoun. Now, Brady Calhoun used to be a really good reporter when he was with the News Herald back in 2008, 2009, when he was reporting on the boot camp case. I don't want to get into all those details, but he did good work. There was another guy over there, I forget his name, I wish I didn't, who wrote a book about it. He also did very good work. And I reported on that whole thing. It was a year-long story, and it played out in the courtroom exactly the way it played out on my show. And that's because I brought every medical examiner in the country outside of Quincy on the show, and we figured out what happened. And that's exactly how it played out in the courtroom. And it shocked me because that's not how I thought it happened when I first got here. But you pursue the truth, you sniff it out, you're curious, and sometimes you can discover the truth. Here's, by the way, this is the best I've got all night. This is important. I hope you'll remember this. There's two things I'm going to point at. One, if you have investigators who are not curious, they're not investigating, right? The most important thing that an investigator can have is curiosity. If they're not curious about something, if they don't ask questions and follow up on things, they're not really investigating. Now let's look at the press. When news outlets are not trying to scoop each other, they are not news outlets. They are PR firms. Real news outlets that are loyal to the readers and the viewers, when those are their customers, they're trying to scoop each other. That's what news was about. That's what made it great and fun and exciting. But when they are not trying to scoop each other, do you think WMBB is trying to scoop WJHG, is trying to scoop News Herald? No. They simply report what they are given, which is PR. So it's not news. They've got to be curious as well. Curiosity is where it's at when it comes to reporters and investigators. And when you don't see it, they're not doing what they say they're doing. They're on the take. They're in on it in some way or another. And I know some of the ways they're in on it, but I got to get to the story here. So Brady Calhoun is now in on it. All right. WMBB has been persecuting Margot Anderson and James Finch from the outset. They have been in on this. They still are in on this, and they are acting as the sheriff's PR firm. And there are reasons why. Let's just call it a family affair for now. All right, take a look at this. Tell me if this looks like fair and objective reporting. As a hearing, the evidentiary hearing gets closer ahead of a planned February trial, the remaining defendants in the Lynn Haven corruption case filed new motions to dismiss in hopes of ending the prosecution now. This is the 18th and 19th motions to dismiss that have been filed in the more than 2-year-old case with varying degrees of success. All right. Makes it sound like they've been trying a lot, but not getting their way, doesn't it? James Finch, the owner of Phoenix Construction, and Margot Anderson, the city's former mayor, are charged together with conspiracy to commit bribery. Finch is also charged separately with 2 other counts of bribery and giving a false statement to the FBI. Anderson faces a separate bribery charge. So far, says the WMBB, the defense has been successful. Okay, watch this very closely. So far, the defense has been successful in getting Judge Mark Walker to throw out a variety of charges, forcing prosecutors to seek several indictments over the past 2 years. The defense has forced the prosecution to do it. Originally charged with more than 60 counts, prosecutors recently filed a new superseding indictment with only 5 counts. I thought it was 6, 2 on Anderson and 4 on Finch, but okay. The defense had previously been successful in having Judge Walker dismiss the conspiracy charge, only for the prosecution to file a rare motion for reconsideration. That motion was granted by the judge. It was partially granted, by the way. who reinstated the charge but wrote at the time, quote, because this court has an obligation to impose the least drastic remedy, it agrees that while count one is duplicitous, the conspiracy charge, it should not have granted the motions to dismiss. All right. So the judge granted he partially granted to bring back some of the conspiracy counts. All right. So now it goes on. The defense, tell me if this is down the line fair reporting. The defense is once again attacking the conspiracy charge, hoping the judge, who has previously scolded the prosecution, will grant the motion. The defense continues to argue that prosecutors have failed to properly file their indictments and that they lack proof necessary to go forward with the trial. So the defense is once again attacking the conspiracy charge. That's what they're supposed to do. Also, the defense attorneys are once again, claiming prosecutorial overreach. Here's what the defense said in a recent motion. Due to the government's repeated disregard for the court's findings and conclusions of law, Defendant Finch respectfully suggests that dismissal, this is a new motion, is the appropriate remedy. In short, the duplicity cannot be chalked up in this case as a harmless pleading defect or remedied by a curative jury instruction at trial. And then it details the government's history of misconduct, the prosecutor's history of misconduct in this case, and impossible legal theories giving rise to a presumptive of vindictive prosecution. That's what the defense is arguing. Okay, so the defense's motion lists several items that the defendants said is evidence of actual vindictiveness. Here's what the list includes. The government's refusal to discuss voluntary surrender before the return of the superseding indictment, despite having met with Finch's counsel, through counsel, having produced without incident tens of thousands of pages of documents, and Finch's having knowledge that he would be charged. Okay, so in other words, the government, when they indicted him, wouldn't allow him to voluntarily surrender. And they're saying that that is part evidence of vindictive prosecution. Another one, the FBI's unhinged post-indictment call to Finch, despite his being represented by counsel, expressing extreme anger due to the government's not having the opportunity to publicly arrest Finch in Lynn Haven in front of his family. So, all right, let's just keep going. The illegal use of a media group to orchestrate the announcement of these arrests, including posting on social media. What that has to do with is former U.S. Attorney Larry Keefe paid, and I don't know, I guess through the Justice Department's budget, the U.S. Attorney's Department Justice budget, according to the documents, paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for a media group to present these very publicly on the news and so on and so forth. And the defendants are claiming that was illegal. Another example, they say, of vindictive prosecution is the government's repeat attempts to manufacture a conflict of interest to seek disqualification of Anderson's counsel. So initially, when the prosecutors found out that James Finch, the wealthy developer, who was not indicted at the time, was helping former Mayor Margo Anderson, his lifelong friend, with her legal fees, the prosecutors tried to say that was a conflict of interest, shouldn't be done, and pissed off the prosecutors enough that they indicted James Finch too. And the judge said, there's nothing wrong with that. All right. The government's motion for attorney's fee subpoenas, court denied as impermissible fishing expedition. The government's repeated allegation that Finch is uncontrollable and should not be trusted to receive, review, possess important information that could exonerate him. That's incredible. The government's repeated misconduct before multiple grand juries. That's part of what the judge called the prosecution reckless about. Wow. The government's repeated failure to provide all Brady material without request. Brady material is evidence that could exonerate the defendants. The government's repeated violation of court orders. That's what this evidentiary hearing is going to be about. The prosecutors not turning over the evidence that they've been ordered to turn over. And every time they claim they have, something comes up that shows that they haven't. And so now they've got to show cause to the court, to the judge, why they haven't been following court's orders. That's part of what it's a big part of what the evidentiary hearing is going to be about in less than 2 weeks. The government's unjustified reliance on false witness statements to secure multiple indictments. That'll be interesting to see why the defendants say that those are false witness statements. They better show Judge Walker why it's false, or Judge Walker is going to be annoyed. They better have evidence that shows the witness statements are false. And if they do, it's going to be unbelievable. They are also, the defendants arguing, says WMBB, several. Okay, this shows the extreme bias of WMBB. WMBB was very involved in the persecution of Mayor Margo Anderson. WMBB, look, they are partners with Todd Neves Media, Neves Publishing. You'll see it when you watch WMBB. It'll say Neves Publishing Partners. Now, Todd Neves he runs a media company that does all the campaign stuff for most of the establishment candidates, right? His company will take like $60,000 to make the commercials and so on and so forth for the candidates that the establishment want to get into the county commission, for example. He's partners with WMBB. Talk about a conflict of interest. So this is, and also you've got Huey Lewis in the news director. That's Tom Lewis. That's my nickname for Tom Lewis, Huey Lewis in the news. He's knee deep with these guys. I mean, and then there's more that I just don't want to tell you right now. But it's a family affair. All right, so there are several legal technicalities having to do with the nature of bribery and conspiracy. So the defendants, WMBB says, are focused on legal technicalities. That's what they would have you believe. Now, if you were indicted with the full power of the federal government, based on what we now know, and the government now admits was false testimony to the grand jury in the first place to obtain the indictment, and for 64 counts. And now it's down to 2. Largely because the prosecutors themselves have dropped a bunch. How would you feel if the news media said, well, you might be right that the remaining charges should be thrown out, but it's a legal technicality is all. Legal technicality. Please remember in 2 weeks, when evidence is presented and testimony is given at the evidentiary hearing, please remember that what you're going to see is what WMBB calls legal technicalities. Please remember that. Bernie, you don't know what you're talking about, says Huey Lewis in the news. Says Brady Calhoun. Because, Bernie, what we're talking about has to do with Section 666. Honestly, 666. And the definitions of quid and pro quo. And it has to do with the proximity of time. That's what we mean by legal I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But your reporting has been atrocious, deceitful, not just dishonest, deceitful. You've been invested in this. Literally invested in this. And it's crumbling. And you are going to have egg on your face because you've been lying. WMBB, Brady Calhoun. Huey Lewis and the News. He's the news director. Finch and Margot Anderson have maintained that an RV that Lee Anderson, her husband, received from Finch was paid for. Here's where I can see the PR work. And even if it was not paid for, it was not a bribe. Hey, can you add that in there? Sure, we'll do it for you. They said, I know it's in there. I've read the whole thing. They said prosecutors have failed to prove that the RV was either the reward or payoff of any specific vote before the council. The judge has previously scolded this line of reasoning, stating back in April that if somebody gave my wife an expensive RV and then I rule in their favor, I'm certain I would be impeached. See, what you're not explaining, WMBB, because you're deceitful, is that the initial indictment charged Margot Anderson with receiving a free RV from developer James Finch. That's what you told the grand jury, and that's what was in the indictment. But then you changed it. Then you said that, oh, okay, well, it was actually sold to the Andersons. But you knew that it was sold to Lee Anderson. Sold. And then he said, well, there's no evidence that they paid for it all. Remember, if you're not curious and you don't look, you don't find it. Who's the writer of those great books? Rowling. J.K. Rowling? Is that her name? She has a great quote. She says, this is good too. She says, there's nothing like looking if you want to find something. Remember that. There's nothing like looking if you want to find something. But if you don't want to find something, then you can say, well, there's no evidence of it. How many times have you heard that? That's the new thing. There's no evidence indicating. And then you can just throw in something that Facebook and YouTube don't want you to say. There's no evidence. Well, then, because you haven't looked. No evidence. There's no evidence that they paid. Okay. But look what WMBB does at the end of that paragraph. It's true. I saw Judge Walker say this. If somebody gave my wife an expensive RV and then I ruled in their favor, I'm certain I'd be impeached. Got two problems with that. Now even the prosecutors say that Finch did not give her an RV. He didn't give the Andersons an RV. Number one. At the time, the judge was told something different. Number two, the quid pro quo. What if the votes that were not deciding votes, by the way, and that had been already approved by the legal team, what if the votes occurred long before the RV was sold to Lee Anderson? Well, then that quote is completely off base. Brady Calhoun knows this, but he wants to deceive you anyway. But it doesn't matter. Look, all this PR that you're doing, WMPB, man, you've lost this battle. This is like, I can't even think of a good analogy. It's like you've been telling somebody, the audience, one story. And you know in less than 2 weeks, that story is going to get blown out of the water. How do you know? Because the prosecutors have already dropped most of those charges. Not these particular ones, but the other ones about the home cleanup and all that stuff. But you're clinging on with these little deceitful paragraphs. At what point are you going to come clean? At what point are you going to tell the audience the truth? I know the answer. And the answer is when you have to. When you're forced to. Not because it's the right thing to do, not because you have a public trust. Media have a public trust. Reporters, journalists have a public trust. To be on the take or to be part of the scheme, part of the conspiracy to mislead the public and deceive the public. Violate your public trust. All right, I'm going to tell you, we're going to finish this up, and it's good. But again, I want to first thank those who let me do this.
Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777.
It's a hot time in Florida, and my friend Ryan could make sure your air conditioning is running at peak efficiency. He could even install a new one, built to a higher standard, American standard. Find out more at pcairrepair.com. So defense attorney Guy Lewis, in one of the latest motions, says, and this has to do with the legal technicalities that WMBB is talking about, has to do with the legal definition of quid pro quo, of the bribe. It's not a legal technicality. It's the foundation of the matter. All right. If there is a bribe, there has to be something of value given in exchange for an official act. And it all has to take place in a time that makes sense. All right. So the defense attorney says there are no allegations in the indictment. There are no allegations of when a promise, offer, or agreement was made. Those are important. Those are essential in the charge. There is no description in the indictment of how these individuals express their intentions or understanding. There is no detail whatsoever as to the nature of an alleged agreement or what was expected. So maybe they can explain that in a couple of weeks. I'd love to hear it. We need to hear it. Judge needs to hear it. And if it's there, the jury needs to hear it. Margot Anderson's attorneys point out that the motorhome deal was done before Hurricane Michael, and there could not have been a bribe for her alleged actions to funnel millions of contracts to Finch after the storm. Quote, Anderson could not have accepted or agreed to accept the motorhome with the intent to influence these unknown and unforeseen matters, her attorneys wrote. Right? That makes sense. Lewis also argued, a lawyer, that an alleged bribe to City Commissioner Antonius Barnes Lewis is the defense attorney for Finch, was simply a business loan. He points out at one point, the defense attorney points out that at one point, Barnes, the former commissioner, told the FBI just that. All right. So initially, Commissioner Antonius Barnes said, I did not take any bribes. And then later said, well, if you're offering me a deal, I'll say what you want me to say. Something like that. Something like that. Bernie, there you go, taking liberties. And I admit that I sort of took liberties there, but that's pretty much what happened. Right? But we'll see. Quote, in fact, in a videotape discussion. Oh, I got to see that. Please show some of this in the evidentiary hearing. Yeah, I want to see some of that. A videotape discussion between Antonius Barnes and former FBI agent Borghini. Barnes explained the purpose of the loans. Barnes explained to the government that those loans had nothing to do with any commission vote. All right, I got one of those tickles in my throat. Just stop. Everything has to be a joke. All right, let me try to get on with this. Try doing live shows and then you get like a tickle in your throat. All right. So this videotape discussion between former Commissioner Barnes and the FBI agent. His business and his service to the city of Lynn Haven stayed separate, he said. At the conclusion of the interview, Commissioner Barnes promised that he was never up to selling a vote or anything of that nature. It was a loan to a friend, nothing more. We can Look, it's reasonable for people to say, yeah, I don't believe that. Nobody just gets a loan. I mean, because we are talking, in fairness, about a contractor who is getting city business and a commissioner who votes on this. So it is a fair question to ask, right? It doesn't look good. Is it illegal? Is it a federal conspiracy? Is it a state ethics violation? These are all good, fair questions. But what the federal government has to prove, the way it works, is when you're indicted and charged, what the government has to prove is that it was actually a conspiracy to bribe a commissioner for votes that benefit you. That requires specificity, is what it requires. It requires specificity. You got to say when, how, was it close to the time? Was he even there to vote on it? These are things that have to be proved. And if you have them, put them in the indictment. Prove it. This is this kind of stuff that's going to be discussed on in less than 2 weeks in front of the judge under oath. However, Commissioner Barnes, former Commissioner Barnes, accepted a plea agreement. So after he told the FBI on video that that's not what happened, then he changed his tune and he accepted a plea agreement with prosecutors. They said, okay, we won't charge you on that. We're saying that you committed, you were guilty of being bribed, but we'll take that off the table, Commissioner Barnes, if you say that Finch did bribe you. Wait, I wasn't bribed, but if I say Finch bribed me, you'll drop the charge? That's called a non sequitur. The lines don't connect. Logic doesn't follow logic. Am I right or wrong? It doesn't look good. We want you, FBI. We want you, Sheriff's Public Task Force. We want you, U.S. Attorney's Office, State Attorney's Office. We want you to clean up local corruption. We know there is local corruption. We know you have the evidence. You've told a judge about it. You've told another judge that Bay County is more corrupt than New Jersey and New Orleans. And you didn't mention Margo Anderson and James Finch. You mentioned others who are still running around free. Some of whom you've endorsed for re-election. See, that doesn't look good. It doesn't look honest. Does it? Say, Bernie, I don't like when you say that. I know that. But am I wrong? Everything I just said is in under oath affidavits to a judge. Yeah, but we don't like when you say it. You don't like when I say the truth. We want you to clean up the town. You know all of these, not all of them, but you know who the government officials were in Bay County who extended hurricane cleanup, who inflated the prices to line their own pockets. You know about the comfort stations, don't you? You know the comfort stations. Yeah, those were, see, after the hurricane, this is one of the biggest things that they haven't really done anything with. After the hurricane, FEMA was given all kinds of stuff. The Panama City Commission voted and gave like $10 million. It doesn't matter. FEMA's going to reimburse us. What? Do you hear yourself? But after the hurricane, people needed food, Bernie. People needed water. And so we had to pay a boatload of money for that, Bernie. The roads were closed. It was a dire situation. It sure was. But once the roads were drivable again and once the water was on, y'all kept doing stuff. People kept benefiting. The comfort stations were one of the biggest scams in Bay County. And the people who were involved in the people who brought the comfort in the comfort stations to the needy and to the suffering in Bay County. Well, why don't you guys finish that sentence? Public corruption task forces? You know the answers. You know how much money was stolen in crooked contracts and bribes. You know what happened to much of that stuff that FEMA gave. And it was a whole lot more than an RV sale. It was a whole lot more, wasn't it? We need you to clean up the town. We can't do it. Only you can do it. Only you can do it, and you have the public trust to do it. We need you to do it. Will you do it? Will you clean up this town? Will you stop messing around with this stuff that you know is wrong and clean up the stuff you know that happened? You've got the evidence. It's a strong case. But can I tell you a secret, FBI? You're probably going to have to do it without the sheriff's office. And you know why? Can you help us out? All right, let me finish this. I need to talk to you now. Let's finish this. So, Finch's attorney, Guy Lewis, also said that Finch loved Lynn Haven and that he worked to improve the city. And then this is, in short, Finch, and this is all true, in short, Finch regularly participated in Lynn Haven government activity because he cared deeply about the town in which he was born and raised. And it may be that his participation in government naturally resulted in a transaction and series of transactions of the city in a manner favorable to Finch. But how can Finch is advocating for cost-effective good government, even his family, even his company might have been beneficiary of such a platform, be subject to criminal liability? So, so much of what people know about this, they don't know. What did Ronald Reagan say one time? I don't want to get into it. I don't want to make it partisan. But, people have reputations. And as I've looked into this and as I've talked to people about this, I had met Derwin White before, and I knew his game. And I knew his change orders and how he would win a contract for maybe $10 million and it would end up being $18 million after the change orders. Right? I knew that. But here's what I'd always heard about developer James Finch from lots of people. I've heard that when he gets a contract, it's always done on time. And there are not change orders. If he gets a contract to, build roads at so many millions of dollars, he outbid the competition and it's done on time and it's done well. I've always heard that. I've seen nothing. In fact, there was one time where James Finch was challenged in court about something like this. It was about a decade ago. And James Finch said, I was told this by a friend one time. And I said, this cannot be true. And I looked into it. It damn sure was true. James Finch wrote a check for $1 million with a blank name on it and said, if you can prove that I was over time and I was over money on that project, I'll put your name on that. Something like that. Guess who got the $1 million check for proving that he had been over time and over money? Nobody. Whoa. Who else would do that? That's pretty amazing. So I have seen no evidence in this case where any of the charges have evidence that supports it. And when I do, I'm going to turn the camera on wherever I am and tell you. I'll do it from Tallahassee. Prosecutors have just shown evidence that appears that these two are guilty. I'll do it. I'll do it. And if I see contrary evidence, I'll do it too. All right. So his attorney added that Finch should also be judged on the basis of all of his good works. Should also be judged based on all of his good works. Okay, so now I'm not going to get into all this. Okay, this is good that WMB put it on there. It does show fairness. I've been on WB's ass, but this shows some fairness here. So you can read this for yourself. It's basically Finch's attorney saying, look, Finch grew up here, 2-time Citizen of the Year, donates a lot of money. He takes care of his community. He's a good guy. That's in there, right? But if he committed any of the crimes that he's accused of, he still has to be convicted and he still has to go to prison, right? Fair? Fair. But all that stuff's true too. In a third filing, Anderson's attorney asked for the government to, so she wants specifics. They have to provide specifics of these bribes. These are the legal technicalities that WMB described. All right, so we know that the evidentiary hearing, which is going to be unbelievable, is on December 12th and 13th. We know that if it's like last time, the investigators and other witnesses, holy man, they're going to get called up on the witness stand and have to answer some really tough questions. And they're going to be documents shown in the courtroom. Nobody can videotape it. Like if you saw the recent high-profile court cases like the Alex Jones stuff and all that stuff. And what was the defamation case with the actor and the actress? I always forget these people's names. But you could watch it on video, right? Can't watch this one. Why not? Because this is a federal trial. State trials like the O.J. Simpson case, they can be televised. But this cannot be televised. No recordings in a federal courtroom. That's why when you see those sketches, those courtroom sketches, those are federal cases. So I can watch, I can take notes, and then I can report back on you. And so can the Beacon of Bay County. If you're not following them on Facebook, you should. The Beacon of Bay County did great work at the first evidentiary hearing. And they're following this stuff very closely as well. Reporting and commenting. All right, just like I do. This is not straight news. This is a news and commentary program, right? I don't pretend to be a straight news reporter. I don't pretend to be a straight anchor. I am a commentator, and that is still under the umbrella of journalism, just like a political cartoonist is, just like a feature writer is. It's all under journalism, the big banner of journalism. But I still have an obligation to show you the evidence when I make an assertion, right? I can make assertions because I'm a commentator, and you know that up front. Boy, this is hot. It's a hot time in Florida, I'll say. All right, if you would like to support my efforts to bring you the rest of the story, right? The truth as I can find it. Truth is elusive, right? Don't always get there, but I'm curious. And I'll tell you the truth. I'll tell you what I find. I'll tell you what I see when I can. There's some things I don't tell you because the time is not right. The mood is not proper, but I'll tell you what I can. But if you'd like to support my efforts, the reason I can do this is because it is independent and I rely on crowdfunding and sponsors. And if you'd like to throw a tip in the tip jar, this is how you can do it. You can become a patron for as little as $5 a month. It is easy. It's anonymous. That's important, isn't it? And you can quit at any time. Patreon.com/Bernie Thompson. It means a lot to me. That's the only reason I can do this. So that's one way you can support my efforts. And I'd also like to, of course, thank the Unknown Patriot. There he is right there. It's from The Gong Show. I love it every time I see it. The Unknown Patriot, thank you so much for helping me do my best to bring you the rest of the story. That's all I got. All right. Lots more coming, and I will see you soon, okay? Thanks for being with me.